The stock market is sitting near record highs. Artificial intelligence stocks keep attracting billions of dollars. Tech companies continue pushing higher. And yet XRP, Bitcoin, and most altcoins are nowhere near where many investors expected them to be. So here's the question. If regulatory clarity is getting closer, if institutions are preparing for digital assets, and if everyone keeps talking about tokenization, AI, DeFi, and the future of finance, then why does the crypto market still feel stuck? Why are so many investors frustrated right now? And why are some analysts saying the biggest move may not happen until much later than most people expect? Because what we're seeing today may have less to do with XRP itself and more to do with a much bigger cycle that's still playing out across the entire market. And later in this video, we'll look at why many investors could be completely misunderstanding what happens when the Clarity Act finally arrives. Let's get into it. One of the biggest disconnects in today's market is simple. Traditional markets are doing great. Crypto isn't. Look around for a second. The stock market continues pushing toward new highs. Technology companies are attracting massive amounts of capital. Artificial intelligence remains one of the hottest investment themes in the world. And from the outside looking in, everything appears to be moving in the right direction. But when crypto investors check their portfolios, the feeling is very different. Many are still waiting for Bitcoin to regain momentum, waiting for altcoins to wake up, and waiting for XRP to deliver the kind of move they've been expecting. That's why frustration has started creeping into the market, because many investors expected things to be much further along by now. But here's where it gets interesting. Some analysts believe the problem isn't XRP. They don't believe the problem is Chainlink. They don't believe the problem is Cardano, Hedera, or even the broader altcoin market. Instead, they believe we're still moving through a larger market cycle. And if that's true, then understanding the cycle becomes more important than understanding the daily headlines. Now, one of the biggest developments everyone continues watching is regulatory clarity. Supporters of the Clarity Act argue that clear rules could remove years of uncertainty that have slowed innovation across the digital asset industry. And it's easy to understand why investors are paying attention, because if institutions finally have a clear framework to operate under, many believe adoption could accelerate much faster than it has in the past. But this is the part many investors overlook. Clarity may be incredibly important long-term. That doesn't automatically mean markets explode overnight. And that's exactly where opinions begin to differ. Some investors believe the Clarity Act could immediately trigger major moves across the market. Others believe clarity is simply one piece of a much larger puzzle. Because markets still move through cycles, liquidity still matters, and investor sentiment still plays a huge role in determining where capital flows next. Most importantly, Bitcoin still tends to lead the market. And that's why many analysts continue focusing on Bitcoin's structure rather than individual headlines. Because historically, when Bitcoin begins a major move, the rest of the market eventually follows. And when Bitcoin struggles, many altcoins struggle with it. Now let's talk about XRP, because XRP remains one of the most talked about assets whenever regulatory clarity enters the conversation. Many supporters believe XRP is positioned to benefit significantly from a more defined regulatory environment. But even among bullish investors, there are different opinions about timing. Some believe the biggest moves are still directly ahead. Others believe patience will be required. And that's where the conversation becomes very interesting. Because if you look back at recent market activity, XRP actually delivered a meaningful move during the last cycle phase. The problem is that many investors expected something much bigger. And when expectations become too high, disappointment often follows. That's not unique to XRP. It's happened across multiple digital assets. Many projects moved higher, many investors made money, but for a large portion of the market, the gains simply didn't match the expectations that had been built up over the years. And that gap between expectation and reality is one of the reasons sentiment remains mixed today. But here's the question investors should really be asking. What happens if the cycle isn't over yet? What happens if regulatory clarity arrives while tokenization continues growing? What happens if institutional participation expands while new sectors like AI, DeFi, and real-world assets continue gaining momentum? Because those are the trends many long-term investors are paying attention to right now. And in the next part, we'll break down why some analysts believe those three sectors, AI, DeFi, and real-world asset tokenization, could become some of the biggest themes driving the next phase of the crypto market. Now let's talk about the three themes that many investors continue watching very closely: artificial intelligence, decentralized finance, and real-world asset tokenization. Because whether you're talking about XRP, Bitcoin, or the broader crypto market, these are the sectors that keep showing up in almost every conversation about the future of finance. And that's not a coincidence. Think about what's happening right now. Artificial intelligence continues attracting massive investment. Companies are spending billions of dollars building new AI infrastructure. Governments are paying attention. Investors are paying attention, and many people believe AI could become one of the biggest technological shifts we've seen in decades. At the same time, decentralized finance continues evolving. The idea of moving value, accessing liquidity, and interacting with financial services without traditional intermediaries is something that many believe will continue expanding over the coming years. But perhaps the biggest conversation of all revolves around real-world assets. Because tokenization is no longer just a theory. Major institutions are actively exploring it, financial firms are discussing it, and governments are paying attention to it. That's why many investors continue pointing to tokenization as one of the strongest long-term narratives in crypto. But here's the part that often gets overlooked. None of these trends happen overnight, and that's where many investors become frustrated. They see the headlines, they hear about AI, they hear about tokenization, they hear about regulatory clarity, and they expect immediate results. But markets rarely work that way. Infrastructure gets built first, adoption follows later, and then eventually the market catches up. That's why some analysts continue arguing that patience may still be the most valuable asset investors can have right now. Because if the larger crypto cycle continues playing out, then the next major move may come when most people have already given up paying attention. And historically, that's happened more than once. Now, does regulatory clarity matter? Absolutely. Many investors believe it could remove uncertainty and create a better environment for innovation. But clarity alone isn't the entire story. The bigger story is what happens after clarity arrives. What institutions decide to build, what products come to market, how tokenization develops, and how sectors like AI, DeFi, and real-world assets continue evolving. That's the bigger picture many long-term investors are focused on. And when you put all of those pieces together, it's easier to understand why some people remain optimistic despite the current market conditions. Because from their perspective, the fundamentals haven't disappeared. The timeline may be taking longer than expected, the market may be moving slower than many hoped, but the larger trends are still moving forward. And that's why many investors continue watching XRP, Bitcoin, and the broader crypto market so closely. Not because of what happens this week, not because of what happens this month, but because of where they believe the industry could be heading over the next several years. For now, the stock market may continue grabbing the headlines, AI may continue attracting most of the attention, and crypto may continue testing investors' patience. But many believe the next chapter hasn't been written yet. And if they're right, the opportunities that people are waiting for today may look very different once the market cycle finally turns. Let me know what you think. Do you believe regulatory clarity will be enough to help drive the next phase of crypto adoption? Or do you think the real story is still the larger market cycle playing out behind the scenes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's update, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest XRP and crypto coverage. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next update.